Welcome back to the podcast. Today we got Dr. Gretchen Gagel with us, and she is a global leader in the construction world. Really brings great leadership and guidance and focus, and bringing women into the industry and helping them grow and others in the industry. So excited to have her on the podcast today. Gretchen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm happy to be here.
I saw you just got a brand new book coming out, and exciting for me to dive into that. I mean, it's kind of written to women, but I feel like I need to read it.
Yes, this is definitely a book for both men and women. I wasn't planning on writing this book. Wiley Publishing actually tracked me down, one of their author acquisition people, and said, "Hey, you've been in construction for 40 years and you have a PhD in leadership. How about you write a book about women leading in construction?" And there were days when I was writing that book that I thought no should have been the right answer for that question. But no, I really loved writing it. There's 129 people in this book. There's Olympians and corporate leaders and male leaders like yourself in the construction industry, and obviously female leaders as well. But it's really a book about male allyship and how we support women and how all of us show up as our best selves as leaders.
Being that I work for my wife, right? She runs CDO Group, and she's a great leader for our company. I mean, it's been phenomenal. But watching her transformation, right, from where she started and kind of being side by side with her as she went through those early years of growth, and as she stepped into her leadership, I just noticed that it was a lot different for her than it was for me. Just in the people that I had to reference, I grew up around great male leaders, and I mimicked them. Really, the truth was, I kind of parroted everything they did. I just watched what they did. I watched their tempos. I watched their behaviors, and that was a great thing for me to learn. I noticed that as she stepped into that, right, she was definitely a much different leader than I was. I ran this place more like a Spartan war camp, and she led it in a much different way. She didn't have that same backdrop that I did. And let's talk a little bit about that as you develop women leaders.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I came out of engineering school in 1986, Ralston Purina hired me as their first female operations manager. So there were 62 men and me in the country. There were no female role models. And then when I joined FMI, I was woman number 2 in 1994, one woman role model, right? So most of my leader role models were male as well. And when I moved to Australia in 2018, I kind of fell into running these women's leadership programs in the pipeline industry and the crane industry, bringing together 25 women at a time in a 6-month leadership program. And having run 14 of those now, I've learned so much about how we grow women's confidence. And Anthony, I'm sure your wife is in many situations where she's one of only 1 or 2 women in the room, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She is often that.
Yeah. And what we don't realize is how that shapes your confidence, how that shapes your life experience when, I tell a story. I think I tell the story in the book that I became president of another company in 2013, 2014, sometime in there. And one of our male partners was taking me to a client that I was going to be taking over. And we were going to be headed into a trailer. I knew that I was going to be the only woman in the trailer. There'd be 12 men in there, the contractor and the client. And we'd been working to create this alliance. And I asked him, "What are you going to do to establish my credibility?" And he said, "Oh, I have this." And I said, "Okay, what are you going to do?" No, Gretchen, I have this. Because it's very difficult. You have to reprove yourself over and over again. And we were not a woman-owned business, and I was president of the company, which is another thing people kept asking me. Why did they hire you if they're not going to make it a woman-owned business? Well, because I'm the most qualified person to be president of the company. Anyway, we walk into this trailer, we sit down. He proceeds to launch into the agenda without introducing me. And literally, I sat there for 2 hours saying very little. It wasn't appropriate to just interject myself into it. And when we walked out, I looked at him and I said, "So your strategy for building my credibility was to ignore me?" And he was mortified. He was like, "Oh my God." But he was so focused on what he wanted to accomplish in the meeting. It wasn't done in a mean way. This is a person was very close to, right? So it's not malicious. It was completely unintended, but you see women being spoken over in meetings or women's taking the back seat in the meeting room. And so there's all these things that men can really do to help women thrive in the construction industry.
It's funny how you say that, because look, I think that awareness comes true with all of the people that I mentor, right? And I consider my wife, as her support, to be able to create a place and a space for them, right? To be able to go into a room, because I can walk into a room and suck the oxygen right out of it, right? Without even blinking. I'll walk in, and just who I am is that way. And to develop other leaders, having to really create space for them in a way that's not, where you support it, right? You don't want to leave them someplace where it's too big of a leap or too much of a leap. You really want to start to really create that. And, what's great about her is that naturally inside of her, she's a leader, right? she runs a law firm. It happened to be, she went from running a law firm to running a construction company and owning and running the construction company. And it was just a shift in, maybe confidence, and I'm not even sure it's confidence. I think it's just more about appropriateness, right? Just learning how to have the appropriate spaces, and also not having to be, there's places in her leadership that she's great at that don't need, she doesn't need to be the construction expert in the room. She's the leadership expert. And I think some of that comes up because, in a male-dominated room, oftentimes it's kind of showing off how much you know about the construction side. When she walks in, it's more about how to make sure everybody gets what they need, right? It's like a different focus.
Well, and great leaders lift up. I had two rules when I was president of the last company before I moved to Australia. I never went anywhere alone. I never went on a sales call or anything alone. I always took somebody with me. So never go alone policy. When we landed a new client and I took a more junior person, I was president, so I guess everybody was more junior to me, but I made sure they spoke first. I mean, I might make a couple of introductory comments, but I would say we landed a major airline, spends $800 million in 370 locations, and we helped the head of construction and her directors kind of reshape how they were delivering construction. And I'd say, Elsie's here to lead this meeting, and just let them shine, because once they attach to you as the president of the company, they're attached to you. And great leaders give other people the space and the voice to succeed. So that's awesome, Anthony. That it sounds like you excel at that.
Well, I think there's also a gift in, so some of the other things I noticed for her that was different, that being allowed to be a woman with different characteristics in the family life than men. She would oftentimes talk about our children and talk about, and I just, there was something I never talked about in a room, right? I didn't mention my family. I never talked about, having to go pick up my kids from school and she just brought that right in. So a little bit of that took, to get the shift there. It went from someone who those are in her day-to-day experience, and getting comfortable with that, or me getting comfortable with that. I think it was more about me than her. And I started noticing, going, wow, you don't have to be this robot all day, right? And she shares her experience about her children and how important it is, and dance competitions, and leaving the boardroom to go to a dance space, and being able to go back and forth between the two roles very, very well.
Yeah. Edgar Schein, he was an amazing academic at MIT, wrote 40 books on culture and leadership, and did quite a bit of amazing consulting, and coached me the last year he was alive before he passed away at the age of 94. And he wrote a book called Humble Leadership, and it's about building level 2 relationships with people. And it's about taking the time. And I have to say, I was horrible at this early in my career. I didn't want to talk about anything personal. People would, they'd see my 1K tag, that I was a 1K on United, and say, Gosh, you don't have children, do you? Yeah, yeah, I do. And oh gosh, you can hear that thunder in the back. We
It
have
sounds like
a
it's storming
massive
there real well.
storm going
Yeah,
on
yeah, it's good.
in
It's good.
Kansas City today. But they'd say, yeah, I'd say, yeah, I have a 1 and a 2-year-old or a 2 and a 3-year-old. And oh my gosh, who watches them when you're gone? Every week. I flew 48 weeks out of the year till my kids were 7 and 8 years old. And I started saying, I put them in the trunk of my car with a little food and water. And so far it seems to be working out fine. But I almost had to hide my personal life because of the judgment I felt I received from people. But Edgar talks about these level 2 relationships where you get to know a person as a human being. People want to be cared for, they want to be treated like a human, that your mother's sick or something else is going on. And as Edgar says, it's not about we're best friends and our families get together every Saturday, but it's really taking the time. And I was too busy. I was too busy to do that early in my career, and I stuffed my personal life away because of the judgment I felt. And it's been really fun as I get older. I'm still not perfect at it, but to spend that time, that little bit of extra time learning about somebody.
Well, what's amazing for me is that um, watching her do that has deepened the relationships with everybody in the company. I mean, the level by which she gets support, you know, I would tell you that my method was really this very warrior mentality. Maybe, in fact, as I look at it, I would even say I probably scared people, right? I mean,
Me
just
too.
by
I
the
used to make my assistant Bambi cry
right. So it was more that
30
hers was.
years ago.
Yeah. Hers was more. I mean, she has put on people's weddings. She has been a godmother to some of their kids. She's built relationships that have depth and weight across the company. There's 64 employees, and I would tell you that every one of them could tell you some story about Sophia interacting with her in some way. Maybe less the people in the field. She probably spends more time with the different office personnel, but more. She's got this amazing deep relationship with people, and she's not afraid to bring the children to the office. Say, hey, I need to leave early. I have this to go do. Hey, let's get to the point of what you need me for in this meeting. Let's talk about those items. I'm going to be out of here because I have a 3:15 here. And I'm like, I've never done that. I've sacrificed more relationship with my family because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Right.
Yeah.
And just different mentality. And, as of today, we look at it and go, all right, we've broken through, we've got a lot better tenure. Right. We don't go through people as often. I don't look over my shoulder and see a bunch of dead bodies in the field. There's some great depth to the teams that are working for us.
Yeah. We have to change the culture of the industry. I'm tired of hearing that people left because they weren't tough enough for construction. It's like, why do we have to be the industry that you have to be so darn tough? And yeah, I was on the Brinkman Construction Board for 7 years. I was chair the last 3 years, and I'd walk a job site. The board would walk a job site every quarter. And we were doing an update in a trailer, and you could tell one of the superintendents was getting a little nervous. And finally, one of the leaders said, "Oh, he really needs to go." And I'm like, "Great." And I kind of looked at me. He goes, "Well, my son's in a school play, but I need to stay for the end of this." And I said, "Please leave. Please just walk out the door. Um, go see your son in the play." But we have the person that opens the gate has to be the person that closes the gate at night, and everybody's got to put in so many hours. And look at our suicide rate. Do we want to be that industry? Do we want to be the caring industry? And it's hard because the people that have been in the industry for a long time, they're like, well, I went through it. Well, they should have to go through it too. And somehow we've got to turn that corner and say, yeah, I appreciate the fact that you went through the toughness, but we're just going to be a different industry now.
Well, and today with technology, that's happening. I mean, look, most of our industry has been built on a very flawed mentality. I mean, the structure. I mean, for all of us in the business, it is kind of structurally flawed in that we don't spend enough time in the beginning of a project doing great research, understand the project before we run in.
Yep.
Our country I just came back from Greece. And, let's call them 4,000 years old worth of development, 2,500 of really big development, and we here in the United States have crushed them. I mean, and now here, they start with a much better piece of property than we do. I mean, Greece is just naturally beautiful. But from a development point of view, from what we've done here in this country in 250 years, we have just built the bejesus out of it, and we've gone really, really fast. And our society's got depth. It's got great weight. I mean, it's not perfect. A lot of times we want to complain about red or blue or whatever we're all complaining about. I don't think anybody's ever completely happy. But I looked at, look, they can't figure out how to get a dumpster corral. I mean, there's garbage floating everywhere, and we've done some great structural stuff in our country in the 250 years we're here, and we got some way to go. Right. Look, no doubt we have a long way to go and places to continue to grow, which is natural. But our business is been set up for kind of flaw, right? The whole bid process is nonsense. The amount of data we go into a project, not slowing down and capturing enough data so that we can feed the rest of it. Now with AI and the things that are coming down the pipeline for design, being able to understand the parts and pieces of a project much, much better, being able to take schedules and look at them, where you can really figure out how to develop them. How many of our projects, day 2 of a project, the schedule's useless.
Right.
Right. I mean, so that's all predicated on bad start. I mean, think about the bid process. We bid these McDonald's projects or Raising Cane's or Panda or something, and call it, let's just say for ease, say there's 50 line items. They literally, we go up for 3 bidders on every line item. We make them fight against each other to win the job. Now we have to take the low cost provider on a project.
Yeah. Low initial price does not equal low total delivered cost. Right. That is one of my primary messages in the industry.
Yeah. Gretchen, we've set this business up for, we set it up to make it hard. Mm-hmm. Now we're starting to see that, look, it's just not sustainable. And we have a long way to grow. We have so much more to go build and so much faster than we're going to start looking at this. So I think there's where, the opportunities go, and having great leaders, great women leaders, look, women have always been the cornerstone of building great foundations, great families, great, there's a wisdom. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I say there's something mystical about a woman leader. A woman leader, there's something a little bit different than the male leaders. There's a completely different energy. And I think when you tap into that, it's a gift for all of us.
Well, there's a lot of research out there. I went down a lot of different rabbit holes during my PhD. I mean, when you have an engineering degree, an MBA finance focused, you don't study human behavior. So I studied leadership, org culture, and change, 50 years worth of theory in all of those areas. And there's just so much research out there that diverse teams are better problem solvers. And, back to your point, I got a call a dozen years ago from a chain you may have worked with. I don't know. Well, it's retail. And they said, we just remodeled 200 stores, bid every job, used 50 different contractors. We're not sure that was the most cost-effective way to do that. And it doesn't even take somebody in construction. My best friend's a doctor. She could probably look at that and go, yeah, I don't think that was the best way to do that. But it's interesting because then they were about to do another brand, and we helped them set up regional alliances, do the risk assessment of how many stores to give to the contractors so they weren't overextended. And in our very last meeting before they signed off on it, the finance person for the company said, now, how do we know we're not getting ripped off if we don't bid the jobs? And I looked at him and I'm like, this is not an Intel chip plant. This is a retail store. You should be able to tell about what it costs per square foot and be able to modify that by geography. But this lack of trust, and as you said, one of the most successful projects I ever worked on was right before I moved to Australia, a $3 billion project with General Motors. And we sat down with the 7 executives with Barton Mallow and Gensler, and we got really clear on culture, our metrics, what substantial completion meant when 7 different answers came out. And then we took that out to 25 leaders and then to 60 leaders. And was that time consuming? Yes. But did we get alignment? I mean, that was a highly successful project that we just don't invest that up front. And I think that's one of the things, Anthony, just to switch gears here a little bit. In the book, I took my years of being CEO of multiple companies, right? My PhD, watching great leaders, watching bad leaders. We learn a lot from watching bad leaders. And I came up with this framework I'm calling grounded self leadership. And the reason I call it grounded is somebody standing on a rock, and it's your purpose and your values, right? Where you are, who you are as a leader has to be grounded. Like Anthony, I've been with you now for what, 30 minutes, right? I know some of the things you stand for. I know
Sure.
you stand for giving people space. I know you care about your employees and you care about your clients, but really getting rock solid about our values and our purpose. That's what grounds our leadership. Then having the courage to live those values, to stand up for them with humility that you don't have all the answers, how to be able to think critically, and then how to take your brand out into the world as a leader. So we think about leaders as the interaction and the relationships, which is also covered extensively in the book. But it has to start with us. Like, who are we? And are we crystal clear on who we want to be as a leader, and living that authentic leadership?
Well, there's a difference, I think, in a male dominated room where egos get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And look, I'm not saying that men are all bad. So look, I'm not trying to male bash my male counterparts out there, but look, in a male dominated room, it's hard to be vulnerable. I mean, up until recently, today, men are much more vulnerable than ever before. Right.
Right.
There's a
You
much
thank Brene
bigger.
Brown and people like that for
No,
helping
no,
us
exactly
understand,
right. Here,
for all of us to be more
for
vulnerable.
sure. I look at my career from where we started and the men that I work for to the men that I work with today. There's a dramatic difference in our ability to be vulnerable, and vulnerable leadership really creates that grounding space, right? Because a lot of that behavior came from hiding your vulnerability, right? A lot of that dominant behavior, a lot of the chest pumping, chest popping, the barking, all of that really comes from. I mean, I could look back at myself and go, most of that was hiding from my fear that you're going to find out I didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
The conclusion of the book, I tell a story. I did a lot of road trips writing this book, and Australia has 10,000 beaches, so road trips are very fun along the coast. And I was stopping in another little town every night. I stayed in a different town, driving from Sydney to Brisbane, and I stopped in a town called Foster, which has an R in it, but Australians don't say their R's. And so when I checked in, she said, "Oh, you should go see the dolphins at sunset." And so I went down to the water, and I'm looking and I'm looking, and I can't find the dolphins. And she made it sound like there were going to be like this massive amount of dolphins, right? And I thought, well, gosh, I'm stupid. I can't find the dolphins. And I started to walk back to my hotel, and I said, this is ridiculous. So I walked over to a woman and I said, "Do you know where the dolphins are?" And she pointed 90 degrees from where I was looking. There was like an inlet. It was different water, right? And the picture doesn't turn out great in the black and white version of the book, but these dolphins just cruising through the water, not jumping, with the sun setting behind them. It was the most beautiful, peaceful thing. But had I not asked for help, and I think that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness, and that great leaders don't have the answers, they have the questions to ask. They
Mm.
have that next great question that elicits all that wonderful thinking from all the people you have on your team and in the room. And you're right, Anthony, when we're young and insecure, we think, gosh, I don't want. And I've learned a lot about imposter syndrome. My friend Allison Shamir just had a book published on imposter syndrome. 70% of us will have imposter syndrome at some point, and I talk about that in my book and how that impacts our confidence. So yeah, I love that we're creating a safe space in the world to talk about these things, where I don't think 20 years ago anybody was talking about imposter syndrome.
No,
Do you?
no. And that's what's funny. The places that we are as a society, the languaging around the human experience, but here, you can't fault the people in the past. I mean, if I look at my parents, they were literally surviving.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when I look at them, they were coming to this country. They barely spoke the language. They were working 3 jobs at a time. They were immigrants that were trying to make sure we had food on our table. Right. Today, we've gotten a lot more. We have a lot more resources than they did. And we can kind of step back and start looking at, all right, look, what's not working? Why isn't this working? Why are we so frustrated? Why are we exhausted all the time? What's sucking the life out of us? And we can start to look at it and go, all right, look, if you want to get empowered and really, work on this, that languaging is coming to the surface. And I think that's a lot of fun, right? I think it's a lot of fun when we work on, as a leader, I know Sophia and I, we work a lot on leadership skills.
Yeah.
Right? Bringing in different coaches, bringing in different mentors, bringing in different people that work on our whole leadership team.
Yeah, I have a coach, Vanessa in Sydney, and people, after Edgar died, I was crushed. I waited for a while to find a new coach, but people were like, well, Gretchen, you coach CEOs. Why do you have a coach? I'm not fully formed. I want to keep learning. Curiosity. And my coach has a master's in neuroscience and psychology. We are learning so much more about the brain because of these things called fMRIs. So that's why we know about an amygdala now, right? And who knew we'd be standing around at cocktail parties talking about amygdalas 20 years ago? But that's the next frontier, is continuing to learn about our brains, because there are chemical things happening in our brains that we're just completely unaware of. And, you think back to when they were leeching people and, thought we had two hearts or whatever. We've learned so much about the body, but the brain is really going to be, I think, the next frontier of leadership discovery.
I think it's a pretty good spot to start. Let's talk a little bit about why you believe diversity is, and why. I'm with you. Let's talk about why diversity in an organization is good.
Yeah. Well, I think so. I've started this new institute just because I'm crazy, right, at 60, to start a new global initiative. It's called Women Thriving in Construction. People can find it on the womenthrivinginconstruction.org. And it's intended to be create global conversations about why women in construction. So let's just stick with women for a second. We have a massive labor shortage. I was just we're doing a study with NCCER, the National Center for Construction Education and Research, and FMI, on all the trades in America and what percentage are women. And I just was working on this weekend. So what percentage of electricians in America do you think are female?
I'm going to say less than 5%.
Yeah, 2.4.
Yeah.
And we were at 2.1, and plumbers is 1.9. And we're just getting just looking at the 23 data, it might be off a little bit, but of all the construction trades, more than half have declined in the number of women in the last 5 years. And yet we have a 500,000 to million person shortage over the next 5 years in construction. So it would seem to me to be a no-brainer. If we have this massive labor shortage, this is a business decision, right? This isn't about being nice to women. If 2.4% of our electricians are women, and if we could get that up to 8 or 10%, not at the loss of men. Anthony, you made this point earlier about not bashing men. I love men. I've been married to 2 of them, right? Number 3 is out there somewhere waiting for me. Just needs to play golf. That's all I need. But all joking aside, if we could increase that number to 8 or 10 or 12 or 14%, attracting more people into our workforce, that's going to help us solve the labor problem, A. And then, as I said, there is so much research, whether it's socioeconomic background, gender, whatever that diversity is that you bring to a team. The IQ of a team is not based on the collective IQ of the people on the team. It's based on the diversity of the team, and the IQ being the ability to solve problems as a team.
When it comes to, the trades, there haven't been great women role models there,
No.
right? I mean, most of these companies are owned by men, right? And that evolution starting to come into play, right? As I look at Sophia and leading this company, and we do a lot to really work on bringing in women subcontractors. It's a big part of her initiative, is to really to pull them up, right? To work with some of the smaller brands, and some of the big brands we work with love it, right? We get a double spend on each of their dollars. So every dollar that they spend with us, they get a double spend in the field with a woman owned sub or a minority owned sub. I think both are really important for us.
Mm-hmm.
But making that shift, when you go back to talk a little bit about diversity, work has to be done there. right? Just like you were talking about, when you walk into a room and be able to have a woman leader have space there,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to do the same thing for the minority subcontractors or the women-owned subcontractors that are out there, right? It takes a little bit to create a space for them to thrive, right? Just assuming that they're going to, hey, we're just going to pull you in, you got to figure it out, isn't going to work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, it's not. And I talk a lot about that in the book and make sure I'm lifting up the voices of women of color too, because I know I have white privilege. And it's interesting. Lee Jordan came on my podcast. He was head of diversity. He was in operations for decades. And then they had him head of diversity. I want to say Chevron, but it might have been Shell, and he's black. And he said to me during the podcast, he said, as a black man, I probably have more privilege than you do in construction as a white woman. There's kind of this pecking order of privilege and how people are viewed. And it's unfortunate that the DEI has become so politicized, that diversity, equity, and inclusion, because isn't it about respect? That I can throw those words away, right? Isn't it about making everybody feel like they belong, no matter what they look like, that they should be treated as a human being and treated with respect? And it's interesting. So I just bought a new house here in Kansas City, and I met with 6 contractors last Friday. I'm being my own general contractor. I've done some big remodels, and I was interviewing electrical, drywall, paint, and flooring, right? So the second electrical firm, I actually thought to ask them, I said, do you have any female electricians? And they said, yeah, we have one. I think they have 12 electricians, a pretty small electrical company for residential. And I said, does she get flack in the field? And they said, no, because one of our other workers is her brother, right? So she has built-in protection, because if anybody gives her any flack, they're going to hear about it from him, right? And it's like, but what about all those women that don't have that bodyguard, that are putting up with? And I can tell you, some of the behavior I've dealt with, even in the white collar world, has been atrocious, just atrocious. And a lot of women without as much fortitude would have left the industry, even like into my 50s. Atrocious behavior. So I just think it's about respect and belonging, and we need people. I don't know if anyone's tried to have an elevator repaired recently, but it took 3 weeks in my last building, because there is a shortage of elevator mechanics. And
We certainly have a shortage of people throughout the industry. And, and by the way, these are the jobs that aren't getting replaced by AI yet. Robots will, we definitely see a future where robots will take over the construction world for sure. But as of the next 10 years, it's a great career, especially for those people that are thinking, hey, look, I don't necessarily need to go to college. I've got a couple kids that are in college that are having a heck of a good time. I'm not sure they're learning much that'll be of value afterwards, right? But maybe it's a separation between home and the work world. But I think it's really a continuation of high school and a place for them to practice doing the laundry, but it's a really expensive place to do that, right?
Yeah.
Today, being able to enter into the trades and getting into the construction world, you can do that without a $200,000 expense of going to college. Right?
And here's why people that aren't in construction need to care. So my girlfriends, they're like, God, why construction? And I'm like, do you want to charge your cell phone or drive on a road or eat in a restaurant or have your baby in a hospital? We're short electricians for data centers right now. And guess what data centers do? They store our data. So all this stuff that everybody, lawyers and doctors and bankers and everybody wants to store their data. If we don't have electricians to build the data centers, it's not going to happen. So it really is about the sustainability of our industry. We build and maintain the assets of civilization. Back to your point, Anthony, about Greece and 4,000 years and the civilization we have built. We have to have the people to maintain and build those things. And it's a great industry. And that's why I invested in writing the book and why I'm starting Women Thriving in Construction. It's a wonderful industry for women. I love the industry, being recognized by my peers, being inducted into the National Academy of Construction in 2021. There are, I think, about 450 members in America. It was very liberating for me because I realized I don't have anything left to prove. Like I've earned my spurs, and now I can just go help other women be successful. And you and I were talking before we started recording about women not taking the time to network and support one another. There weren't enough of us to do that 30, 40 years ago, right? But I started a dinner in Denver when I came back. I left the industry for a little bit to finish raising my kids and get off a plane. And I came back in the industry in 2013. I started a dinner in Denver for women executives in construction. And they're like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we're just going to have dinner. And it's funny because the men say, what do you say about us? And I'm like, nothing. We're not talking about you. We're talking about how fabulous we are. And so when I bought a place in Kansas City 2.5 years ago, I started a dinner in Kansas City, and 20 women came to the first dinner, carving out more time. And I don't think, Anthony, as I reflect upon this, most women, not all women, most women have two jobs. They're raising and running their family. They're raising their kids. They're finding the orthodontist. They're hiring the nanny. They're buying the clothes. And this is not, once again, a slam on men. It's just kind of the way the world unfolds, right? So women don't have time to network. They're just trying to get the daughter to dance class and leave this meeting. And so really, I'm really excited about continuing to create spaces for women. I've done a breakfast in Sydney, Australia for women to just come together and take a deep breath and network and support one another. So I think that's really important too.
So I think when I hear you say that, what I really hear for me, and as a man in the business in the industry who really look, I've got 3 daughters, and for me, it's important that my daughters can walk into a room and there's no difference looking at them or looking at a man, and creating those spaces. Now, I think that the thing that's going to change, and what Sophia does differently, my wife does, she allows for that space for her. It's a different way of looking at the business, and you're allowed, those times when you weren't allowed to talk about taking the kid to dance class, which and as we start to look at it, I go, yeah, you're not allowed to talk about that in business. No, yes, you are, right? Or bring your dog to work, or talk about your the stuff that happens in the household. Now, what's funny about that is today we both co-run the home, right?
Mm-hmm.
There isn't you do this, I do that. We both run a home. Now, there's some things that she naturally does better than I do. And there, some spaces where she flourishes and some things that I flourish on. And we've taken on some roles there. But, allowing those roles, to me, that's the diversity of conversation. That, look, if you're a minority in a room, or a woman in a room, or you're a young person in a room, the rooms are sounding different today than ever before. And I think that brings what you're talking about, that diversity of beings that bring a much wider vision of what you can do. Now, I'm not going to say that I always believe that diversity is easy. We have definitely stumbled on our journey to be more inclusive, right? It takes a real appetite, and you cannot walk into it haphazardly,
No.
right? It's got to be created, right? It's just, well, hey, we start hiring for quota or hiring for numbers. We've had some major disasters trying that, right?
Yeah.
We fall on our face. We've caused all kinds of problems. And today, if you're going to bring and create what you say, hey, we're going to be a diverse space, that's work to do that.
Yeah. There's an amazing person I actually am meeting with in a couple of hours. We're doing a big global project together. Dr. Michael Welp wrote a book called 4 Days to Change. And his organization has been taking men out into the woods for 30 years, helping men understand dominant culture. And it is not for the faint of heart. I learned about him from Sam Clark, who is CEO of Clark Construction, third generation general contractor. They sent 18 people through this training, went from 200 million to 500 million in 3 years. Women are beating down their door to work for them, and they have a 99 engagement score, and they're multiple times more profitable. He came and spoke with me at the AGC conference this year to launch the book in America. And he said, I'm doing it because my competitors aren't, right? It's not just the right thing to do, it's a business thing. And Anthony, I want to go back to the point that you have 3 daughters. So I'm sure in your career in construction, you have heard men make derogatory comments about women.
Sure. Not just in business, in life.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
life. And
Yeah.
I was on a golf course one day. I do try and play golf every week. And I was standing on a tee box, and there was another tee box over there going in another direction. And I could hear these 4 men. And I thought, if you heard men speaking about your daughter or your wife in the way that you are standing on that tee box talking about women, would you be okay with that?
That's right.
And that's that zero tolerance behavior, whether it's men talking about women or people talking about people with different colored skin or whatever. I have a saying, if I don't want it to be a headline in the Denver Post, it doesn't come out of my mouth. It doesn't go in a text. It doesn't, it's, would my mother be proud of hearing me say this?
Well, it's how we act in in every room. It's not just what we do in front of women or in front of minorities or in front of. It's how we act behind closed doors.
Yep.
Right. Today, the men in my life are accountable for their behavior. Right. And we hold each other accountable. Right. I belong to a group of men who do not, who do that we I remember I walked into a room. I brought into a group called MKP, and I was talking about one of my daughters who was 12, and she's going through what 12-year-old girls go through, and I'm like, she's being a real bitch. Right? I was really, and the whole group of men looked at me and go, yeah, we never we never speak that way,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, a space where in today's society with the men that I'm around, at least. That is not behavior. We hold each other accountable for finding even the nuanced places that even in frustration, we learn that. Now, I think the same thing happens with my wife, the way we talk about people, the way we talk in our relationship about others, how we talk to each other about, other people who work for us, language and all of that. Societally, we're learning how to do that.
Yep.
Right. I don't know that was there for my parents' generation.
No. And it's interesting. This is the allyship that I talk about in the book, and men want to know what to do. I'm speaking at ECC, the big oil and gas conference in September, and we just did a practice run, the first all-female panel, because last year I went and saw 15 speakers and they were all male. And I made a comment about that. So guess what? Now I'm moderating the all-female panel. But they said, what do? We want to know as men what to do. So I'll give you a great example. I was walking a Brinkman job site with a female project manager, and she told me the story where we had 150 framers on a multifamily job, and one of them whistled at her. And she came in the trailer and she's like, no, maybe they weren't whistling at me. Maybe they were just whistling. And our superintendent, one of our young male superintendents, went out, called everyone down and said, that's our boss. That's our boss. You will treat her with respect. Called the owner of the company, told him what happened. He backed him up and said, I'll fire the entire crew if they do it again. But once again, it goes back to treating people with respect. It doesn't treating men with respect, treating women with respect, treating everybody with respect, and having zero tolerance. I was so proud of that superintendent.
That's right. That's right. I'm proud. As a man, I'm proud of that. Right. When we stand in rooms in those spaces and hold everybody accountable for your intended behaviors and your unintended behaviors, that the one who comes in a room and you were talking before about walking in a room where somebody just ignored you, right? An unintended behavior, right? Maybe not malevolent, right? But it was an unattended. And how do I get really responsible for those behaviors, right? How do I get myself conscious that, all right, what's the room I'm going to be in, right? Who are the people there I want to shine light on? How do I really bring and make it an inclusive space and still get done what I need to get done, right? A lot of that stuff that I make up about not being able to do that is all in my ability to language. And today we're seeing that that's a big difference, that we have this depth. We have a much deeper understanding of ways to be that, we're called into like never before. And that's exciting for me. Like, it really does excite me to know that, I talk to my daughters about men. Look, you're going to find there's going to be a male population out there that has this. Not that you have to tolerate in any way. Never take for it. Any of my daughters will stand toe to toe with just about any man that I will put out there, just because they hold them accountable, right? Just like I'm held accountable in the way that we speak about. And by the way, here some of my sons have called me out on some of my behavior when I was a young man. Right. Here's one they got me the other day. I loved it. We're on vacation in Greece, and we're talking about drinking with women and how behavior is when they go to bars and they go drinking, and they have to stop, the night and go, before we go any further, you've been drinking, right? How's your behavior? Now, I was like, you guys do that? I thought, when we were young, right? When we were young, we drank because we wanted to get the behavior to change. And they're like, no, Dad. It goes, Dad, today we consider that date rape. And I saw that awareness in a young man. And I looked at that and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it blew me away. Now, these are a 21-year-old and a 31-year-old son that are just, the stuff that they're doing and where we're going as a society is so much different than ever before. And that to me excites me.
Yeah. And, one of my friends that I have so much regard for in construction, Brent Darnell, he's been teaching people about emotional intelligence in our industry for at least 25 years. And as you can imagine, 25 years ago, that was a different conversation. But being able to create a pause button, and emotional intelligence is not about not being emotional. It's about who's in control, you or the emotions. And I have had times where we say something we instantly regret because we're triggered in some way or something happens.
That's right.
And that ability to, I see that in you, Anthony, to be mindful to the impact we're having on other people, to the words that are coming out of our mouth, to the thing stopping. That's what you're just describing with your sons, right? To be mindfully present to what their impact or potential impact is on another human being. And that is an amazing, amazing gift.
Well, Dr. Gretchen Gagel, I am so honored to have you on this show. The work you're doing in our industry has been legendary, and it really does create these spaces that we continue to grow. That growth is wonderful. If people want to get your book, where is it available?
Amazon. You can find me at GretchenGagel.com. You can find the new institute at WomenThrivingInConstruction.org. And that's building. So yeah, Anthony, such a pleasure to be on the podcast.
If someone wants you to come speak for them at their convention, their show, or their group, what's the best place for them to catch up with you?
Yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's really, especially given all the travel back and forth between two continents, or G Gagel at greatnessconsulting.com. Greatness is after Jim Collins' Good to Great. Why be good when you can be great? So G Gagel, Gagel at greatnessconsulting.com.
Dr. Gagel, well, I am so grateful for you. I will make sure I put all that down in the comments down below. Audience members, I am so grateful for you guys being on here. Doctor, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Anthony. Lots of fun.
Hey, audience members, last week we had an amazing week. We had 5,000 downloads. We broke 5,000. It was great. But I noticed that a lot of you guys made it to the end of the podcast but weren't subscribers. If you could take a second and like and subscribe right now, it means a world of difference. Gets us amazing guests like Dr. Gagel on. And if you could do that right now, I would be grateful. And as always, thanks for listening.